What is something that is widely normalized, but is actually, really effed up? Poor care of beginner pets, like goldfish, hamsters, leopard geckos, etc. The fact that one betta fish requires at least a 5-gallon tank, is the reason I didn't get one as a pet in college. I'm so glad I researched that, because I realized how horribly bettas are treated. And people don't care, because they're fish. The way people mistreat and abuse animals on the regular, only because they're not cats or dogs, still boggles my mind. We have research showing that reptiles, rodents, fish, even insects, are smarter than previously assumed, and capable of feeling pain and suffering, but yet somehow, a considerable part of humanity doesn't give two F because it's just a species. The animals get crammed in bare enclosures that are way too small, and replaced when they die, due to the conditions, as if they're just objects that you throw away when you don't need them anymore. They exist just to be mistreated, suffer, and die, like their lives don't matter at all. Just awful. Zero tolerance in schools. Protects the bully, and harms the innocent. Edit. I am so grateful for all of these responses and upvotes. When I made this comment, I was in a bad place, after I was the victim of zero tolerance, from a company, and thought about the kids in my classes over the years who experienced this, and as I have been contemplating leaving a profession I love so much, I just had to write these 2 sentences, and get it out. I thank all of you for your stories and the bravery you have shown to tell them. I have really tried to reply to you, but I am a bit behind, because of all the comments. It breaks my heart that kids have to go through this, and that adults treat them this way. I wish I could write a book and expose this with all these stories, but obviously this is not possible. I will pray for all of you and keep working at changing this policy, but I am only one person. I urge all of you to speak up if you can. You have been so inspirational and kind. I thank the ones who came to my defense. That was so kind. I don't mind opposing views, and therefore, I did not make a big deal out of them, and I upvoted as many comments as I could. That's tolerance. I accept everyone's opinion and value it. Thanks for making the last 24 hours an inspirational journey that restored my faith in mankind. Bless you. Yeah, my school suspended a kid because a person punched him. The puncher got suspended as well, but the kicker is that he didn't fight back. Phew, happened to me a dozen plus times from grade 3 to 8. Finally by grade 8, I just realized I needed to absolutely F them up, because I'm getting in trouble anyway. One was, on the very last day of grade 8, and the principal tried to go to my future high school and have me suspended into the first days of grade 9. Didn't work. Luckily, my future principal disliked that lady greatly, and said, that was cruel. She also once left me behind on a school trip in grade 6, she was a piece of garbage, who loved every bully like her own. This was all in the 90s and early 2000s. As a parent now, it disgusts me, this has somehow stayed the norm. Having to pay for vision and dental insurance in addition to health insurance. Last time I checked, your eyeballs and teeth were part of your body, and should be considered under medical insurance. Teeth are luxury bones. I just paid $1,300 to get a crown on one tooth. And I have dental insurance. So, that's fun. The amount of plastic we use. It's absolutely insane. And then companies say they are reducing waste, but actually making more plastic to say that they are saving the planet. My favorite example of this recently came up from Dempster's through Costco. They are changing the bread tags to cardboard to reduce our plastic use. Meanwhile, it comes in a bag, holding 3 other bags, and the large bag still has the plastic tag. LMAO. And then regular people are expected to bear the burden of figuring out what the F their particular city can and cannot recycle. And then that recycling isn't even always recycled, or it gets shipped over to some other country to deal with. The change needs to happen at the manufacturing/packaging level for it to make any kind of meaningful difference at this point. South Africa, specific answer, having your electricity switched off for several hours a day. This can range from 2 to 8 hours a day. We just organize our lives around it like it isn't a thing, cause we've been doing it for 16 years now. Why? It's a long story, but it boils down to our state-owned electricity supplier being mismanaged for decades, resulting in decaying infrastructure. Ongoing corruption is endemic, which in turn results in our country not being able to generate enough electricity to meet demand. California had this going on for about a year, when I was a teen, and our governor was impeached over it. They weren't announced in advance often, so, shit like being out shopping, or at a movie theater, when suddenly the power goes out, would happen. I can't believe this has been happening for 16 years. Side hustles to get by. If you're working full-time, you should be able to get by. And they're not side hustles. They're part-time jobs. You're working 2 jobs. Sitting here, second 8-hour shift today, thinking that one job really should be able to get me by. Phone use while behind the wheel. Every trip out is a death roulette game. I see someone nearly drift into my lane all the time. This is my biggest pet peeve. I'd say a solid 80% of drivers on the road are what I call non-drivers. These non-drivers don't understand that driving is a full-body experience. You constantly need to be looking forward, behind, to the sides, and assessing what's going on around you while driving. You feel input from the steering wheel regarding the tires and traction you currently have. Non-drivers think you just get in and go, and give zero thought about driving way too slow, or too fast, or being in someone's blind spot, not merging properly, tailgating, etc. The list goes on. And all that shitty driving can happen without a cell phone involved. Add a cell phone, and it's exactly like Russian roulette, like you said. More people need to actually realize that driving is super effing dangerous, and requires your full attention for the duration of the drive. We made a mistake as a society, treating driving like it's a casual thing to do. You're operating heavy machinery. And there's not enough enforcement and penalties for distracted and aggressive driving. Zero expectations of privacy. We're all expected to behave like we could be recorded at any time, and we wonder why everyone has anxiety now. I found 8 photos of myself online in odd sitting positions with people making fun of me in the comments. Nobody asked permission. I'm autistic, so my movements are a bit weird. I effing hate it. The picture takers in the comments are effing awful people. I'm really sorry, friend. If it makes you feel any better, they are likely all very unhappy people. Expecting people to be contactable 24/7, and acting like someone is rude if they don't respond relatively promptly. Back when the main form of contact was calls, it was deemed relatively normal for people to not answer, as they were busy, or not home. Therefore, it was so much easier to switch off and enjoy other things. Now it's expected that people are pretty much connected to everyone all the time. And if you try to disconnect from that a bit, it can almost get you socially ostracized. You can relate it to workplaces as well, and the rise of employers basically expecting workers to be contactable 24/7. Here in Australia, the government wants to bring in right to disconnect laws, like they have in France, where employers can't expect workers to be on call outside of work hours, unless they pay overtime. The opposition has promised to overturn any such laws if they win government. Sigh. This drives me nuts. My family expects 24/7 communication within 2 hours, or they get scared. Like, please F off. Edit, for some of you thinking, I'm being unreasonable, I'm very busy. I have a regular 40 hours a week job, and I'm an artist who sells commissions. I work 7 days a week most weeks, and my parents and sisters call me all day, to bitch/complain, and not to talk to me really. Parents posting their children's entire lives, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and treating them as accessories instead of people. Imagine the horror stories we'll probably hear from these kidfluencers in 10 to 20 years' time. I mean, not even just kidfluencers. I'm so glad my whole childhood wasn't posted up on social media or something. It feels like something that could be used against you eventually. The posts that do my head in, mothers posting up about how their kids have autism, cognitive issues, learning disabilities, etc. It feels like kids aren't getting a chance to ever expect privacy as adults, or to be able to have their own secrets. Working 40+ hours a week, to make enough money, to still be in poverty. I'm not in poverty, but I've had a salaried job, where I work 60+ hours a week for the last 8 years, and I still have to live in the attic of a bar. I don't have kids, I don't have medical expenses, but I will not be able to own a home until I'm in my mid-40s. I thought, if I worked hard I would be able to get house and have a yard. I can't even get a dog, cause I'd feel bad having it trapped in a tiny apartment all day. It's gotten to the point where I'm looking for a wife, not because I'm in love, but just because we'd have 2 salaries. The amount of sugar we consume and give our kids. I finally found a can of peaches that didn't have added sugar or sweeteners in it. It cost $6.50. What the F is wrong with us? Fun fact, peaches are canned with sugar, to preserve flavor and texture. Sucks that it has to be added, but without it, the peaches will soften, dull in flavor, and in color. Still safe to eat though, without sugar. Here's a canning recipe, that's probably less sugar, that you could do at home. Ball mason jar spiced peaches, recipe. Filming strangers without their knowledge, or consent, and posting it online, for millions to see. In 2004, when I started my filmmaking classes, I did some B-roll of a crowd outside of a metro station. My teacher told me, you can't film people, without their consent or knowledge. You either needs to put a disclaimer somewhere, or film their back, or feet. I felt very bad about it. Somehow, this is the new normal now. I was at IKEA the other day, and someone was just filming around, and I'm pretty sure, my face was in there. It's upsetting. Trying to guilt the consumer into thinking, that they are the ones, who can really make a difference with recycling, when 98% of all waste is, industrial, retail, and restaurant, and none of them, are big on recycling, if they do it at all. Figure is from science writer, Elizabeth Royt's book, Garbage Land. They do this in my state with water usage. You can get fined for watering your lawn too much, and there is a huge push for residents to cut water usage. Well, residential water usage is only 6% of all water used in the state. 90% is used for commercial and farming purposes. A push to save water there could save more water than all residents use combined, but it's on us, for whatever reason. It's all to grow alfalfa in a desert, a lot of which is exported. All the feels. In California, residential use is 10% of human water use, and we're shipping alfalfa overseas as well, particularly to Asia, where the alfalfa is fed to cows and sold back to the US. If ag water in my state, I'm NCA, wasn't significantly subsidized, we wouldn't be effectively exporting water from a state that's famous for its recent droughts. We're shipping politicians. Yeah, as an Australian, it's crazy to me. No one likes politicians in Australia at all. Edit, I'm gonna hijack my own comment for visibility, lol. It's so important that we don't worship politicians, because that's how they get away with shit like crime, looking at you, Trumpy, breaking election promises, and just outright bad decision making. For anyone reading this comment, politics matters, and on top of voting every chance you get, please hold your politicians accountable for the actions they take. No politician is perfect, but they depend on the views of voters for their power, and with enough voices telling them what the voters want, they're more likely to do that, to appease the public. Driving drunk/high, among teens. People my age, 18, often mention it in passing, like it's no big deal, then I'm treated like a wet blanket for making a thing out of it. No, Kevin, you don't drive better high, you're just selfish. I had a co-worker your age who one day bragged about being basically blind without glasses and how she'd drive drunk on the weekends. She never wore glasses, nor contacts. In shock I blurted out, "Jesus, you're gonna kill someone doing that." Her only response was, "Well, I haven't so far." Before she turned her back to me. Somehow I was the one in the wrong, though, and got some shitty looks from the others working with us. I used to get made fun of by my group of friends, for being Mrs. Anti-Drinking and Driving. Then after a party one night, Mrs. Anti-Drinking and Driving called her mommy for a ride, and 3 of the 4 people, who got in the other car, are dead. Corporate crimes having almost no consequences. But sometimes they get fined. Usually a small percentage of what said crime gained them in profits. Fines just put a price tag on crimes. Say a company is fined $1 million for deforesting an area, but makes $2 million selling the wood. Why wouldn't they do it? Restaurants and grocery stores throwing away mass quantities of good, edible food, and not being allowed to donate it. During the pandemic, my wife had to close down a restaurant, and an entire kitchen was to be emptied and thrown out. One chef knew of a women's shelter, and we packed everything up. Think of Panera, including a printer, lol, and it took 3 catering cars to ship. It was bittersweet. Sad to see the place go, but so much quality food and equipment was shipped to them. Hotel pans, deeps, utensils, blenders, cleaning supplies, toilet paper. They could have opened up a restaurant, but it's an establishment that demands privacy. We just had an in-person. Delivery drivers and waitresses, having their wages determined by customers and not their employers. AKA, living off of tips, while employers don't pay enough. Outside the US North America, this is not really normal at all. Many waiters and waitresses prefer the tip system, because they make more that way. Other countries don't have tipping problems. People in the US actively fight against changing the tip system. I worked in the industry for years. I made way more in tips than I would have if my bosses paid me even a little above minimum wage. Some nights were worse than others, of course, but it always averaged out. The constant running around on my feet, crappy customers, and late nights got old though. I'm in a regular day job now, and I don't have to work as hard, but making $30 to $40 an hour in cash, with no higher education, wasn't a bad deal. I'm very happy with what I do now, so I wouldn't go back, but I understand the appeal of working for tips. Most gynecological procedures, as they often don't allow anesthetics, and can be downright barbaric. Women get screwed when it comes to healthcare. The father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims, tested his surgical procedures on enslaved black women and girls, also often without anesthetics, even when they were available. He actually outright bought a woman, when her previous enslaver wouldn't let him experiment on her. There's a monument dedicated to 3 of the women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, in Montgomery, Alabama. Is he the one who founded the first, possibly still, widely accepted surgical procedure for repairing vaginal fistulae? Because if I recall correctly, he was also able to use both the lack of basic rights and access to medical care for black women to get many women to let him operate on them. I just feel awful for those poor women. They literally had no choice but to live in shame and agony, or offer themselves up as guinea pigs for a heartless man who scarcely considered them human beyond their anatomy. I can't imagine the trauma, the humiliation of that experience, and, honestly, much of their lives. I'm really glad they're being recognized now for their contributions to women's/reproductive medicine. They were incredibly brave in ways they never should have had to be. This is coming from a woman's point of view. But being expected to spend hundreds of dollars on someone else's wedding. Between buying the dress, nails, makeup, hair, shoes, bridal shower gift, bachelorette party, wedding gift, time off of work, etc. It's just a lot. And I understand you're celebrating someone you are close with, but today people can barely afford to pay their bills. So, shout out to the people who want all of these extravagant things for their weddings, and are willing to cover all of the cost of said things. Doctors dismissing severe period symptoms, because it's normal. If you are vomiting, cannot move from pain, and passing out from blood loss, they don't really care, and usually just give you a slightly better pain medicine, like naproxen, which does F all and tell you to get over yourself. If you had these symptoms and did not have periods, you'd be admitted into hospital on the spot. Endometriosis. Doctors are slowly coming around to it. Took me 46 years to a proper diagnosis: endometriosis, adenomyosis, cysts and damage on my fallopian tubes, adhesions everywhere. Years of being told, maybe you're just constipated, and lots of women have this, it's nothing to worry about, and it's not abnormal to vomit from period pain. F endometriosis, but F women's health care, too. CEO pay. $200 million is already enough to live on a big mansion without worry for several lifetimes. Imagine receiving that every year. Apparently, when you start at a well-known big finance place in the USA, you are told that the amount of money you need to live without working in a comfortable way for the rest of your life is $12 million total. Because at that point, the dividends or whatever will be self-sustaining within any reasonable lifestyle. I don't know if that's literally true or whatever, I am not a finance person. But it amazed me to hear, from a reliable source, that this is what the finance people tell their own people. And that the number is way lower than I would have guessed, though still unattainably high for most of us. It put into contrast how absurd and disgusting wealth hoarding is, not just the billionaires, but even millionaires above that number. For almost any other vital resource, we'd see hoarding at levels 10, 100, or 1000x above what was needed, as a disgusting, abhorrent, pathological behavior. With wealth, we're supposed to be impressed, or envious. Predatory gaming companies, making billions off of microtransactions. I embarrassingly fell victim to one of these iPhone games, when I was in recovery for a major surgery. Spent hundreds. It's one of my greatest shames, and I've majorly changed my habits because of it. I don't think you should feel shame for it. I'm assuming you were mobily restricted, or not able to move around much, so your phone was a large source of entertainment for you. Like the comment above said, they used predatory tactics, and spending a couple of bucks at a time is pretty innocuous, so you weren't doing anything wrong. Plus, you said, you majorly changed your habits because of it, so you learned and adjusted to an issue you weren't as aware of before. I think you should be proud of how you handled it, after and indifferent to the mistake. I hope that makes sense. Forcing mothers to go back to work when their babies are fresh from the womb. It's barbaric and cruel. I went back to working overnights a week after giving birth, because they said they wouldn't hold my job position for me longer than that. My PPD was so bad, and my breasts were engorged and leaking while I worked. They wouldn't allow me to pump or store the milk. I missed my baby so much, I would just stand and silently cry at the register. Luckily, my partner would sometimes bring the baby in when he was up in the middle of the night, lived close by, and a couple very kind co-workers would cover for me, so I could nurse and be close to him. Having children when you're not mentally or financially stable, said what I said. I once had a co-worker who was married to a real boss man boy, and they had a toddler together. She would always complain how they couldn't afford a lot of things and how it was hard. She would tell us stories about how lazy and narcissistic he was. It was sad, because she was like 20 years old, and he was pushing 30. One day, she told a story about how he forgot to feed their effing kid. One day she announces, she and her husband are talking about having another baby. I politely explained the basic economics of having another baby if you can't afford the first one. She hated that, so I practically begged her not to have another kid with that man. Reminded her that he forgot to feed their first kid, and I was called a baby hater. She ended up taking my advice in the end, thankfully. Shunning people for living with family, no matter what the age. I moved back in with my parents in my late 30s. There was no need to, financially. They were just getting a little older and I was finding myself stopping over their house after work more and more. My sister and her family moved in a year later. I get to be around my nephews growing up. There's a village to help in any circumstance, like I can watch her kids if she needs to run out real quick. She did my laundry when I was sick with the stomach flu. Does it have some drawbacks? Absolutely. But it's really amazing at the same time. Also, my mom ended up passing a couple years after, and I think about how I had all that extra time with her that I would not have living on my own. War. I'm going to pick up a gun, go next door, and take the neighbor's stuff, equals obvious psycho. We're all going to pick up a gun, go next door, and take the neighbor's stuff, equals, well, as long as you're all wearing the same outfit, it's fine. Or, our governments have a political difference about an imaginary border, so I'm going to end this person's life I've never met before. You're right, it's absolutely bonkers. Not disciplining your kids, or setting appropriate boundaries, because you want to be their friend, or the cool parent. People always think it's either beating the shit out of your kid, or doing nothing at all, when there's a secret third option, which is doing actual parenting. And teaching boundaries is an incredibly important part of it. Not setting any boundaries at all means the child will have serious issues integrating into society. You're teaching them to become someone who crosses other people's boundaries all the time, which can end either with your kid becoming a serial rapist, or otherwise criminal, or end with the people reacting to said boundary crossing with avoidance, or even violence, and then your child ends up alone, or beat/stabbed. Either way, it's setting your kid up for a terrible life. Citing religion in government policy making. Agreed. Religion should not be the influencing factor with political decisions, laws, or policies. Yes, everyone has the right to practice, but it shouldn't influence decisions that affect the entire population, who may not necessarily have the same beliefs. Yeah, I always argue that as Americans, we're supposed to have freedom of religion, yet our government, and many office holders, are basing laws on their beliefs, forcing others to follow them. One of our most basic rights is, literally, constantly being infringed upon, and it's so frustrating. 40 hours, work week. It's an anachronism. Innovative and beneficial at the time of its introduction, but we seriously need a rethink to fit with the world we exist in now. The 40 hours work week was established with the understanding that a normal household would have someone at home taking care of almost everything else. Obviously everyone should be allowed to pursue a career if they want, but it's crazy how fast capitalism switched from 40 hours being able to sustain a household, to 80 hours plus, barely able to make ends meet.